Well, you're sitting there in Jackson County right now if you're a homeowner, and you're just wondering how badly you're going to get screwed by your property taxes. You're wondering, if you're still trying to appeal your assessment, how low can I get my appeal? What's that going to do to my taxes when it comes to a city, county level, schools, everything else? You just don't know. But I know there's a lot of sleepless nights across Jackson County right now because of how poorly they have royally screwed up that entire process for the last several months, and no one's being held accountable. Now, one thing the county legislature did do this past week is they voted to approve a tax credit, which would essentially freeze property taxes at the 2023 level for currently eligible seniors. It's a nice start, but is it ultimately the answer? David Stokes, our friend at the Show Me Institute, they join us on Wednesdays on KCMO. All right, David, is that the answer, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, it's definitely not the answer. Great to be on the air with you, Pete. So 2 weeks ago, the Jackson County Council rejected the senior property tax freeze, and I thought that was great because this is I get that there's a problem, and Jackson County assessments have been a disaster this year, but this is the wrong way to try to fix it. But then a week ago, they came back, they made a slight change to the bill, which I'll get into more in a moment, and then they passed it. And so if you're a senior citizen in Jackson County, you're probably thinking, well, you might get hammered this year, but at least it's going to be held steady and frozen for the future. And I have no doubt lots of senior citizens like that. But this is still the wrong way to be doing tax policy, to be giving one section of the population a special deal, particularly a section of the population that nobody wants to say it, but is wealthier than other sectors of the population. To shrink your tax base is a very bad idea. This is going to just take property tax burden and move it on to people who don't get this tax freeze. And in relation to Kansas City, it's going to make Kansas City even more dependent on the earnings tax going forward, and that's really bad for long-term economic growth. We need to be moving away from the earnings tax, not making Kansas City more dependent on it. So there's lots of stuff wrong with this legislation.
And did I see, I know you focus on both sides of the state, did I see that St. Louis basically is not going to be able to collect up to $50 million in their earnings tax because they've got to, refund that, or they can't take that from people who are working remotely? So they're basically now crying poverty over there in St. Louis. Did I see that?
Well, you saw there's an argument going on right now over collection of the earnings tax from remote workers. The Kansas City government deserves to be commended. For the past 3 years since the pandemic, they have not tried to collect the earnings tax from people working remotely. Say somebody who used to work in downtown Kansas City, but now is working 2 days a week from home in Lee's Summit and only going in 3 days a week. St. Louis is improperly, and that's the nicest way I can put it, insisting that people owe that earnings tax for that remote work. That's completely wrong. A judge has ruled against them, and hopefully they'll be forced to refund that money going forward. There's an earnings tax committee, legislative committee, looking into this right now, and hopefully they're going to tighten up that legislation next year so that St. Louis can absolutely no longer insist on doing this. But again, Kansas City never did that, and more kudos to Kansas City government for doing the right thing there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so back here in Jackson County then, the seniors are going to get a bit of a freeze. But, you bring up a really interesting point, which is why do seniors deserve a tax break on their property more so than, two working parents with 3 kids that they're trying to put through school and, have a roof over their heads and feed and everything else? And why do the senior citizens theoretically get the break? Is it politics? Is it because the seniors are more likely to go out and vote? I mean, is it that simple?
It is that simple, and that's absolutely why. And I know some elected officials around the state who know it's not such a great policy, but they're just like, I've got to support this. I mean, I'll be tarred and feathered if I don't support this. So yeah, it has to do with the voting base and the influence of the senior community. But there's so much wrong with this state legislation, and even supporters of it agree with that. First of all, it starts far too young. Starting at 62 is ridiculous. If it needs to be done at all, it should be at 70 or so. But what Jackson County, this is where it gets really interesting, Pete, and that Jackson County, when they rejected it, they then added in one additional thing. They put a limit on the value of your house at $550,000. So people with a house, senior citizens with a house worth more than $550,000 are not eligible. That's the limit. Your house has to be worth less than that to be able to participate in this program. So,
and what kind of made up crap is that? 550 grand is just what did they just pull numbers out of a hat and that's the one that won? What kind of nonsense? 550? Why isn't it 525? Why isn't it 625? I mean, these people just make stuff up as they go.
I think they probably did pull a number out of a hat, frankly. I think you're right. But I don't begrudge them trying to put some level of means testing on this, but the problem is, Pete, the state legislation, as bad as it may be, gives Jackson County no authority to do that whatsoever. They have no right to put in this $550,000 limit. If they were doing it with Jackson County's own county money, maybe. But this freeze is being implemented on school districts and fire districts and municipalities and library districts and on and on. And Jackson County has no legal authority to put that change into it, even though in the big picture, I don't even think the change is horrible in that adding some type of means testing is making bad legislation slightly less bad, in my opinion. But I'm certain that somebody's going to sue over this. As people are listening now and realize that Jackson County, there's no authority for them to do that. Some senior with a house worth $570,000 is probably going to sue over this, and I welcome this being sorted out in court if it can't be further sorted out in the legislative process. I'd like this to go away. I like low property taxes for everyone, not freezes like this for one group of people that's going to lead the burden being transferred to, as you said a few minutes ago, those young people with two working families, two working parents, and a couple of small kids. I don't know why they deserve to pay higher property taxes for the same house, getting the same services in the same city as their neighbors who just happen to be 63.
Yeah, that's so true. And, this whole dog and pony show with property taxes, I mean, what is it, Prop 13 in California that they implemented? I mean, I think it was, late 70s. And all that's done is take California property and skyrocket the value out of it because of how low property taxes are.
Exactly. That's a wonderful example, and it's one we try to share. Sure, property taxes in California are low if you're a longtime homeowner. If you're a new homeowner, it's not true. But if you're a longtime homeowner, you have great property tax bills. But that doesn't mean taxes in California are low. Of course, they're incredibly high comparatively because they've shrunk their property tax base. They have to make it in income taxes and property taxes for new homeowners and sales taxes. The tax burden is high, and income taxes especially are much more harmful to economic growth than property taxes. People might not want to hear that. People might hate getting their property tax bill, and there are things that need to be done to make things better in Kansas City and in Jackson County. But, making the city more dependent on the earnings tax is bad. And what we really need to do, first and foremost, is get rid, as we've talked about on this show many times, get rid of the constitutional rule exempting Kansas City school districts from rolling their rates back.
Yeah.
They should have to roll their rates back like every other government in the state of Missouri. And this is why people in Kansas City School District, which is a lot of people, they particularly get crushed when these assessments go up because that's 2/3 of their property tax bill that the rate doesn't roll back at all, even in part. So that's a terrible – there might have been a reason for it decades ago, but that time is gone.
Yeah, well said. David Stokes with the Show Me Institute, Missouri-based think tank. Good to have him on KCMO. Thanks so much, David. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks, Pete. Lots of information available online at showmeinstitute.org.
All right, there you go. And his dog's fired up about the conversation. Love it.